All right, welcome back to the Running with Dave podcast, where I share my running tips, tricks, and training advice to keep you both fit and motivated. Happy to have you joining me here today for episode 6, Sacrifice. So first of all, what is sacrifice? This is something I was thinking about quite a bit as I was preparing for this podcast. And interestingly, the first thing that came to my head were the sacrifices of ancient civilizations, things like animal sacrifice or blood sacrifice. And I was thinking about how that same premise overlaps into our daily sacrifices that we make to achieve our goals. What I mean is, you have to be willing to part with something that you value to receive something of equal or greater value sometime in the future. And that's a interesting and maybe deep, profound truth that the ancient world was trying to get across to us. In the primitive context, of course, they were giving sacrifices to a god or an idol, maybe to nature, the powers that rule the earth and the sea. Whatever primitive human was making that sacrifice to, whatever god, idol, or whatever, that thing would immediately sense the quality of the sacrifice that was given. Think in the Bible where they talk about the sweet aroma of the different sacrifices. And that quality of sacrifice would provide then an equivalent reward or protection in return from that God or the ruler of the earth and sea, the divine ruler. And that could have been rain, safe travel, increased crop yields, riches, or a variety of other things. But it's really interesting to think of how ancient civilizations were trying to model a deeper truth that maybe they didn't know how to articulate yet. And one thing that I think is really interesting across that is how across cultures and across civilizations, this idea of sacrificing something today to get something tomorrow, and to sacrificing something of value today for something valuable tomorrow, is pretty ubiquitous. It happened all over the world. You can look at Central and South America with the Mayans and the Incans, into Asia, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Koreans were doing sacrifices, the Mongolians, even into the Indian subcontinent. In Africa, they were doing sacrifices in Egypt, in the Malayan Empire, in Dahomey, which is modern-day Benin, so West Africa, and even, of course, into Europe with the Vikings, the Greeks, the Romans, the Celts, or Celts. I always say Celts, I don't know why, but Celts. And they were modeling the idea that sacrifice was a way to maybe honor or placate, win favor with their gods or some sort of greater power. And I think at first blush, this is really easy to laugh at, and I think this is, well, what a primitive practice, burning up some good food, burning up a live animal, and how macabre murdering a human being for these types of things is. But I think the deeper meaning and what they're trying to act out is still valid within that. And that's a depiction of a general truth about how we can improve our lives and how we can improve ourselves as runners or individuals. Because what those primitive humans were trying to depict, attempting to articulate, like I said, was a more profound truth, and that deep sense that the more valuable something you want is, the more valuable something you need to give up to get that thing. Said another way, the quality of your sacrifice has a direct relationship to the quality of the outcome or reward. Now, fortunately, we don't make human sacrifices anymore, at least not in that literal sense, but we certainly do make self-sacrifices, and sacrifices for our future selves, our future well-being, the well-being of people around us and our communities. And it's helpful to consider that general principle from ancient sacrifice, that idea that good sacrifices yield good rewards, poor sacrifices yield poor rewards. If you're not getting the rewards you want from your running, maybe it's time to assess the types of sacrifices that you're willing to give and that you have been giving. Are you making excuses to minimize the sacrifices that you're willing to put in? Are you keeping some chips in your pocket rather than putting them all on the table? Maybe if you are, you're sacrificing your future self for today, for a little bit of extra comfort. I know for me, while I was running professionally, I would do this far too often with my core work because it doesn't have to be some big thing that you're missing out that's going to undermine you as an athlete. As we know, running's not unidimensional, especially at the top where every hundredth of a percent makes a difference between a guy who competed in a world beater, an Olympic medal, and not even making the US trials. So those little things can make a huge difference. Those small sacrifices, me not playing video games and doing my core work for 30 minutes. Maybe that would have been the difference, and I'd have been talking to you today as an Olympian as opposed to just a national champion and a professional athlete. And then again, if I had wheels, I'd be a wagon. So maybe let's not focus on the what ifs. But using this as an example, if you're not willing to put yourself out there and sacrifice a little bit of today, a little bit of your comfort, you're never going to get anywhere. We make these minor trade-offs every day, some of them that we don't notice, and that's good. But we always have to make these cost-benefit analyses, to use some economic terminology. And a lot of them are little, but they add up over time and they seem like they can be big things. Sacrifices themselves aren't fun. By their nature, they're not fun. I myself, I don't want to wake up at 5:40 in the morning to go to work. But that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make for future Dave's economic well-being and for my wife. Um, and I often would really enjoy having maybe a second beer with dinner. But that's also a sacrifice I'm willing to make for future Dave's health, for future Dave's running. And I think contextualizing your sacrifices in this way is very helpful. Recognizing that, yeah, maybe I'm passing up on something that I'd like, and allowing yourself to think about that for a moment. But then fixing your eyes on the thing that you want, those future goals, those future outcomes, and how this is helping you get better. Remembering that it'll likely take multiple small sacrifices like this one to get to where you want to be, and how excited you are to get to that future goal state. This isn't a one-time thing. This is a habitual effort. You're doing this over and over, and every day getting a little bit better, and that should be exciting. If I do my best to get out the door to run on Monday, but I skip my runs on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm not doing anything. I'm spinning my wheels. I'm lying to myself on Monday when I'm talking about how I'm modeling my goals and sacrificing. But then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm slacking. That brings me to my next point, which is consistency. Goal-oriented sacrifice is about consistency, making a habit of choosing the option that leads towards your future goal. As you make progress towards your goal, especially if the goal is valuable, one thing you're going to notice is that those small sacrifices you made today are silly in the rearview mirror. I mean, looking back on my own running career, there are a lot of things that in hindsight were goofy, foolish things that I thought were important, but really didn't matter. And some of the other things I did really should have taken even more of a front seat than I gave them. I think my college coach, Dave Smith at Oklahoma State, put this well to me while I was in college, and to our team at a team meeting. He told us that what he tries to do is consider the types of things, the activities and achievements that he'd like to tell his parents or his grandchildren about. Would that be some random party on a Thursday night? Or would it be the time that he won a Big Ten championship on the track? And then when he considers those things, he tries to orient himself toward those activities that he'd like to tell people, that he'd be proud to tell other people about. Running, it's really a goal-oriented activity, and it necessitates this type of sacrifice and consistent sacrifice. To be an endurance athlete, or even just a casual runner for that matter, you have to be willing to give up some things to achieve your goals, whether those goals are just weight loss, finishing your first marathon, getting a new personal best, qualifying for Boston, or just finishing a run. You know, when you're getting started, that's a big goal for people is, hey, I just want to run 2 miles without stopping. But to get there, you have to be able to sacrifice. And it's interesting to me because an unwillingness to sacrifice is a sacrifice of your future. And think about that for a second. Because if you never sacrifice today's comforts for tomorrow, you lose the opportunity to improve. You steal the future from your future self. Without sacrifice, there's no gain. As we used to say, no pain, no gain. And that's really what that's getting at. It's not no pain as in I'm slamming my head against the wall, I'm working real hard through this workout, no gain. Yeah, that's maybe part of it. But the real pain is the sacrifices that you make on a daily basis. The real pain is pushing yourself into discomfort. That kind of sacrifice. No pain, no gain. You know, when I was a professional athlete for both Brooks and later Reebok, people would often comment to me. They would say, oh wow, it's amazing all the things you must have sacrificed to get here. And that always struck me as an odd comment for someone to say, not necessarily because it wasn't true. I certainly was making sacrifices along the way, but I had never internalized those little daily things as losses. And the way that that question was always phrased is it's as if I should mourn those losses in some way. And I think that's entirely wrong-minded. I always had my eyes fixed on my goals, a specific set of goals. And so those other things that maybe other people thought were important to them or thought I should think are important didn't matter. They were peripheral to me. I had my eyes on the prize and I was running in a specific direction. And I was perfectly happy to be living in the woods, surrounded by a dozen other runners, like-minded, working toward a goal, putting off a long-term career just for a chance to grasp greatness by the horns. Hell yeah. Sign me up for that again. But I think that's a huge mistake that people make, which is misorienting themselves. They place the focus on the sacrifice instead of on the goal. Instead of fixing their eyes on where they're going, they focus on all the little things that they're losing, that they're giving up. People want to count all those little things, emphasize those little things to other people, and they become a victim to their goal, which is a weird thing to think, right? Are you a victim to your goal? Oh, you sure as hell better not be. You better be moving forward. Because every day that you step back is a day that your goal moves one step farther away. Don't let that happen. Don't let yourself become a victim to your goal. By focusing on your suffering, you decrease your enjoyment of the process even. And the process is life. Self-improvement is what you do every day. When you look back at your life, the most powerful things weren't necessarily those big milestone moments. Some of them are great, of course, don't get me wrong. But when you think about high school, it's not graduation that you remember necessarily. You remember all those pieces that led up to graduation. When you think of maybe your college diploma, your master's, your PhD, whatever you got to, it's not the day when you stood up there and shook some guy's hand and took the piece of paper. No, it's all those things that led up to that moment that you remember. So don't undermine the process and your enjoyment of getting there, getting from point A to point B. That's life. That's the exciting bit. And so it's important to orient yourself in a way that you enjoy that and you can make the most of that process throughout it. Whether that's in running, in college, in anything that you're doing, your career, otherwise. Make sure you're always looking at, well, how does this sacrifice get me to where I want to be? Am I okay with that? Let's move forward. Yes, let's do this. Because running is about mind over matter. And if you don't mind, it don't matter. So keep focusing on those gains and put those sacrifices in perspective. If you're sore, that's awesome. That means your muscles are going to come back stronger tomorrow and that you did some good work today that you can be proud of. You're a step closer to your goal. Keep moving. Enjoy the process. Like I said, life is filled with suffering. But if you can harness that suffering to work for you instead of against you, you build for a better tomorrow. And while you can't control all the obstacles you're going to face, whether that's in running or in life, you can control how you face them. And you can turn that into an interesting exercise. When things are going wrong, think about that for a second. Just stop and think. Am I approaching this the best way possible? Am I putting my best self forward? If you're not, maybe it's time to reorient and think about the ways in which you can continue to face the problem in a way that's making it better, as much as humanly possible. And it can start small. Sacrifices don't always have to be big things. Maybe little things that just make that future self smile. For me, maybe that's doing 5 minutes of core a day and doing that 2 more times this week. Allowing those habits to build on themselves. Maybe then I'll start doing my core more regularly. As Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. and you know what step you've been putting off. So let's take that first step today and sacrifice a little bit of your comfort. Thank you for joining me today on the Running with Dave podcast. Take the time to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Your interactions help spread my reach and ensure that I can produce more content like this. Until next time, what small step are you making today for your future self?